Hello and welcome to Simple Time Studios, where we recount epic tales in solo roleplay for your entertainment. Today we will be starting the first official episode of Psion Novastar in Ecumenopolis of Mystery. Let us begin. Psion Novastar gently sniffed the atmosphere of a new planet as he left the insatiable curiosity and entered the spaceport for planet D-2023. It was dusty, like there was a layer of dust everywhere that would never come clean. His footsteps seemed to echo more than normal as he took his first heavy steps into the spaceport lobby. The massive spaceport lobby was almost entirely empty. Sleek floors and shaped arches defined a cavernous space that was much too large for the mere handful of beings currently inhabiting it. Yet he knew there was only a sample of what was to come. The abandoned Ecumenopolis of D-2023. A city that spanned an entire planet and no sign of its creators anywhere. It was a somber, occasionally terrifying sensation knowing that he would often be alone in a massive urban landscape with no one else for miles. "Name?" a bored voice called out to him, bringing him back to the present. Looking slightly downward in the direction of the sound, the Orion field researcher found the voice's source to be a Sol Federation human seated inside a small security station in the middle of this cavernous corridor. "Psion Novastar, captain of the Insatiable Curiosity," he answered with a soft, deep voice. The bored human male looked up from his computer terminal controlling the entire security checkpoint. "Ah, you must be the fellow the Orion research base was looking for," he answered and tapped on a few keys. "The Orion Commonwealth base is down at the end of the main building. Just keep walking down that way, you can't miss it." The sentry gestured without looking up from his computer terminal. Psion nodded and ambled through the security checkpoint before walking down towards the Commonwealth base camp. The human border guard was right. There would be no mistaking where the Orion researchers set up once he walked far enough. The original builders had a unique architectural style that did not mesh with the gentle curves or warm colors the Orion Commonwealth preferred. The prefabricated tents and converted rooms stood out like a sore thumb compared to the stark grays and industrial style the builders favored. Walking along, Psion entered the camp and checked in with the research leader. The Orion in charge of the planetary survey team was a bubbly lapine with golden blonde fur and bright green eyes. She smiled as she watched Psion enter her office. "Psion Novastar, I was hoping to meet you before you went out to explore the city. Raven Goldmeadow, it's a pleasure to meet you." She reached over and gave him a brief hug before breaking away. Psion smiled as he returned the embrace. "Likewise, Raven. Hopefully it's not too boring with only your other researchers and the humans for company. Is there really no one else on the planet?" he asked. "No one except us and the automated systems waiting for their creators to return from wherever they've gone," Raven replied, her voice lowering as she looked around to make sure no one else was listening. "And the humans here aren't so bad. In some cases they're even better company than some of the other researchers. Wish more of them were open to a good Orion hug, though." Her decision to keep her voice low regarding the humans did not escape Psion's notice, but he decided to save that question for later. "You know the Orion hug is still very much an acquired taste among the Sol Federation, but it still sounds like you're off to a good start," he replied with a smile. Raven smiled back before changing the subject. "We need someone to explore this sector and catalog the biological life forms there." She began as a holographic map appeared on her desk and focused on the area around the spaceport. A particular section labeled City Park was highlighted. Psion raised an eyebrow as he checked the park and the measurements the map was set to. "Is this accurate?" he asked, even though he already knew the answer. "Down to the last cubic square, yes. You're not the first to be stunned by the sheer scale of the original builders and their creation," Raven replied with a smile. But then this city park is bigger than most cities, Psion stated. Even as the rational part of his mind grasped the scale of the park, he was still in awe at how massive the city was. Bigger than most cities, sustains at least 3 biomes naturally, and preliminary surveys hint at underground construction that runs the length of the park, Raven answered, which is why we need someone to explore it further. And of course, if you encounter anything else of note on your explorations through the city, please relay your findings back to the camp, the Lapine scientist replied as she sent a copy of the map to Psion. Psion nodded and downloaded the map information to his pocket computer. What kind of vehicles does the expedition have? I don't mind walking, but just getting to the park looks like it will still be a long trek. The expedition doesn't have any vehicles available. I have put in a request for vehicle mechanics and universal constructors to build small land vehicles, but nothing yet. The Federation base doesn't have any either, but then with the majority of them being wreck troopers and trailblazers, the majority of them don't need vehicles to explore the city, Raven explained with a sigh. Psion made a note of this. His conversation with Raven soon winded down, and he was then back on his own. Making sure his gear was carefully stowed away in his jumpsuit's hip pockets, the Urson field researcher made his way out of the spaceport and into the city proper. Outside, the city continued to impress and intimidate him with its vast scale. Massive buildings and roadways ran as far as the eye could see. Tabbing his pocket computer, he activated the mapping program and instructed it to project a waypoint to his smart goggles, then grimaced as he realized just how far of a walk it was to from the spaceport. It would take him the better part of several days just to walk there. Fortunately, the map pointed to 2 locations along the way that might be helpful. Hab Block 51 and the Replicator Mall. The first had a supply cache that humans set up that might be helpful, and the second was merely labeled Inert Universal Constructors, followed by a question mark. Walking along the empty streets, Psion observed his surroundings. Skyscrapers towered over him, blotting out the sun as he made his way underneath artificial light. His pocket computer's chronometer reported that it was still late morning when he arrived, but his surroundings made him feel like it was late in the evening. He wondered if the expedition base had any information on whatever public transportation the original builders had put together. There certainly wasn't anything that looked like vehicles on the street as he walked along. Not anything that looked like a functional vehicle at any rate. Eventually he arrived at Hab Block 51 and walked in. It was now late afternoon as he ambled into a large, enclosed courtyard filled with overgrown plants. Above his head was a translucent roof made of an unknown glass-like material. Massive walls surrounded him on every side, each wall studded with windows for abandoned apartments. Stairs for a roughly human-sized sentient being led to the upper levels, as did inoperable elevators. Stepping in, Psion immediately looked around and sniffed the air. The air was thick with the floral scents of flowering plants that had overgrown their planters, runners and vines crawling across the otherwise polished floor. The smart field researcher spotted staircases leading down to the basement and up to the first floor of the apartments. He also noticed a large doorway with a simple sign above it. The elevators were inoperable from a lack of power. The buttons on the control panel were inert when Psion pressed them to try and coax the machine to life. Sighing, he stepped out of the open elevator and counted the floors, looking down at him as he looked up towards the atrium ceiling. 20 floors between the ground floor and the roof of the building. Psion knew the building wasn't well explored. His only notes mentioned an empty diner that was probably behind the large doorway, and a bolt hole that was somewhere down in the basement. That was it. Exploring the upper levels would involve either restoring power to the elevators or walking up 20 flights of stairs. The very thought of the latter made his legs hurt. Shaking his head, he ambled through the large doorway on the ground floor. Walking through the doorway, Psion entered a relatively small and rectangular room. With the room divided in half by a large curving countertop, sturdy alloy stools lining one side of the counter, the purpose was fairly obvious. A ruined red electric sign hanged over the entryway behind him. After a minute of searching and casually looking through the room, he found a handful of damaged electrical hook and data hookups for smart appliances that were partially hidden by the counter. All inert, since there didn't appear to be any power running through the building. Okay, Psion is going to make a perception check to try and locate the diner's breaker box for future reference. He gets a 13 on a 1d20 plus 4. Yeah, he finds something to that effect. Searching the single-room diner again, Psion found a small closet that contained the circuit breaker for the old restaurant. Something that might be helpful later once he finished exploring the basement. Stepping back out into the atrium, Psion made a mental note to see about taking botanical samples of the overgrown atrium plants, since the map didn't mention anything about them. That is, once he figured out how to get power back to the building or located that Sol Federation bolt hole. With a solar lamp in hand, the Ursan explorer slowly walked down the stairs into the pitch-dark basement. Once he finally made his way down to the basement, he saw that the level seemed to run the entire length of the building's considerable foundation. And with the lights out in seemingly the entire level, the place was a maze of concrete maintenance tunnels and metal conduits. Though, arriving down by the main elevator, he found an office that was clearly for the building's original maintenance staff. The only thing left of value was a small workbench and some stationary equipment that might still be usable, if he could restore power. Yet more concerning was a smell that seemed to be wafting through the abandoned tunnels, the smell of animal dung and musk. Something was nesting down here. Okay, is something currently lurking in the basement? I give it a 50-50 since I have no idea what the ecosystem of the planet is like, and 54 says no. Maybe they're nocturnal predators that have gone out to hunt. The smell of nesting animals lingered, but the dark corridors were otherwise silent. Guess whatever lived here was out hunting for the evening. On one level, it was fascinating that life found a way to adapt to this heavily urbanized world. On the other was a reminder that even though the world was abandoned, it was not safe. With his solar lamp raised high, he started to search the corridors for the power station that would bring electricity back to the building, or for the supply cache. Okay, Psion is going to make another perception check to search the Hab block's massive basement for something that would help. I roll a 1d20 plus 4 and get an 18 in total. I'm going to rule that it's enough to find the supply cache, but searching the basement for the power distributor will take a lot more searching. Time that he really doesn't have either. Despite his lamp piercing the darkness, the basement had proven too large. There was no way he could find a way to bring power back to the building without some kind of map or assistance. Fortunately, the Sol Federation bolt hole wasn't too far from the main elevators. Tucked away in one of the larger storage rooms, Psion found a small supply cache that Sol Federation explorers set up as they pushed deeper into the unexplored parts of the ruins. Just like the notes described. There was a self-powered charger for recharging the energy cells used in various tools and weapons, a stationary fusion generator for the charger, a collapsible bunk that was obviously built for human figures, and a small shelf that contained basic medical supplies and sealed rations good for a decade. Everything had a thick coat of dust on it. Psion wrinkled his nose and stifled a sneeze at the dust before brushing off the equipment. There was something sombering about how long the room went without an occupant, but there wasn't much time to think about that. According to his chronometer, it was going to be evening soon if it wasn't already. Surely whatever creatures that were nesting in these in these corridors were nocturnal then. With not much else to do, Psion decided to carefully backtrack up to the Hab Block atrium and gather some botanical samples before starting a field analysis. He suspected most of them would be decorative, meant to look nice for the building's original inhabitants, but he thought he should catalog them anyway, especially since they were everywhere in the building atrium and he couldn't find any mention of them in the research base's files. Okay, Psion makes a natural science check to analyze the overgrown plants in the atrium. He rolls a 1d20 plus 7 and gets a 10. Not great, but it's a start at least. If only he rolled higher. Psion collected tissue and seed samples of every unique plant species he could spot, sealing them into containers before scanning some of them with his pocket computer. The few he could study here in the field turned out to be mostly decorative plants as he suspected. Pretty weeds for feeding herbivores. Yet some of the unidentified ones had a peculiar scent that he felt was worth following up on. Still, it was getting dark, and there was no power in the building except in the supply cache and in his personal battery supplies. Returning back downstairs to the Federation bolt hole, he shut the door behind him and used his pocket computer to try and check in with the Commonwealth research camp. Okay. Can Psion get a signal to the base camp from down here? I give it a 50-50, and 49 says yes, but there might be some difficulty. Then again, he is underground and nowhere near an entrance to the surface. This is Psion Novastar checking in with the base camp. Is anyone there? He began. There was a crackle of static. This is Stardust, Infotech for the Commonwealth base. Wow, you wasted no time getting to work. What's your status, Psion? I'm currently spending the night in the Sol Federation supply cache below Hab Block 51 after collecting botanical samples from the block atrium. I did not make it far before nightfall, and walking around after dark seemed dangerous. I admit I'm having trouble adjusting to just how vast this city is, Psion replied. Sorry, your signal's coming in a little weak. Oh, you're underground in that human bolt hole. Ew. Surely you couldn't find a better place to sleep. Stardust replied with a catty tone in her voice. Psion was starting to understand why Raven was so hesitant to speak openly about her feelings about the humans. It is hard to keep secrets from an infotech, and it sounded like Stardust might be one to keep secrets from. But an information technician obviously didn't have any authority over an expedition leader, so there must be something else going on he was not aware of yet. I still can't believe we don't have any land vehicles in the expedition camp, the Ursan field scientist grumbled, hoping that would be enough to change the subject. No, that was an oversight from someone back at Stellar Crescent University. Raven's trying to convince a few constructors to come to our base, or to get the university network to send more resources our way so we can explore this planet properly. The humans don't have one either, but they're all trailblazers and wreck troopers, so they don't need them, Stardust replied with a huff. Not quite the subject change he was hoping for, but it would do. With hover technology and exoskeletons, I imagine they don't. The Ursan field scientist nodded, even though there was no one there to see the gesture. It sounded like he should consider talking to the Federation camp next time he returned, and also taking more time to meet the others he would be spending the next few months with as he conducted research on the planet's various plant and animal life. Interesting. I'll have to talk to Raven again when I'm back at the camp, he replied before signing off. The silence of the basement, his only company, Psion made sure the door was shut and locked before making himself comfortable and falling asleep. Tomorrow would be a good day to make up for his rushed start today. End of story.